Dogozo Khumalo, they're highlighting the tough balancing act of the finance minister as he delivers this speech tomorrow. And that's, of course, the balancing act of our monies. But also there is the balancing act of the expectations of some of those parties within the government of national unity. So let's get into an in-depth discussion of some of those expectations. We are joined, of course, now by ANC NEC member, Mr. Sihle Zikalala, speaking to us this evening. We're joined as well by Karabo Khakhau, who is, of course, a spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. We're joined as well by Action SA MP Alan Beesley, who will give us their perspective from the outside of GNU, but still inside though, Nhlanhla Hadebe, IFP Parliamentary Chief Whip, also joining us, and Brett Herron, Secretary General of the Good Party. This is going to be a big discussion. Thank you so much for everyone availing themselves. And I think let's start with the parties inside the GNU. I think, Mr. Zikalala, perhaps you can go first. And this is, I think, the question that I really want to start with is the ANC confident that there will be a budget delivered tomorrow? Concerns about that, if at all? And certainly, I think this is speaking to the confidence that the ANC has then in the clearinghouse that is really at the center of this GNU to help all of the parties find consensus.
Well, thanks a lot. May I take this opportunity to extend my greetings to you and all panelists who happens also to be my colleagues at the level of Parliament. Humble greetings to all of you and the viewers at home. As the African National Congress, we are confident that there will be a presentation of the budget tomorrow. And we are hopeful that parties that are in government and those that are not in government will undertake a participation in the processes of the budget. Remember, tomorrow it is an executive authority in a form of the Minister of Finance who will then present the budget, and thereafter the budget will be referred to respective committees of Parliament and thereafter adopted. As the ANC, we believe that the budget should be informed by the priorities that have been adopted by this seventh administration. Those priorities include economic growth and job creation. And economic growth must talk to more investment. It must talk to more infrastructure development. We must make South Africa business friendly, but also ensure that there is a distribution of economy. The second priority of the GNU was and remains that of ensuring that we lower the standard of living. We know that government is constrained. There is a debt on one side, and there is a high demand on the other side. Expectations are high. And therefore, the government must balance the two. How we manage the debt, but how do we ensure that we invest in the economy, in the infrastructure, but we further address the cost of living and cushion the poor. You will know that South Africa is recognized worldwide for its social net. And I believe that is what we expect. Okay. The third priority, which is the last priority of the GNU, is that of ensuring that there is strong government in the country that fights corruption, that saves communities. So a developmental state of some sort that fight corruption but provide services to communities. Okay. Whether you are talking of teachers, you are talking of nurses and doctors, and whether you are talking of police and the army, all of those should be catered for. Okay. And as the African National Congress, we are expecting that the budget will satisfy those broad priorities of the GNU. We may not also, we will not forget that some of these are coming direct from the policies that have been there before, right, such as the National Development Plan, the ANC's Freedom Charter and the manifesto of the ANC.
Okay, so a confident start there from the ANC. Comfortable to say that budget will go ahead and will address the key priorities as set out in the agreements of the Government of National Unity. Karabo Khakhau, from the perspective of the Democratic Alliance, the clearinghouse, how effective some of those engagements have been, and your confidence that the speech will take place. But also, I think let's get into really at the heart of the matter. That what has been discussed. What is the Democratic Alliance hoping to hear where that is concerned tomorrow?
Good evening, Naledi. Good evening to South Africans and good evening to my co-panelists. Thank you for having the DA here today. Let's start with the heart of the problem, VAT. The Democratic Alliance's position as far as that is concerned has not changed. We will not accept any increase on VAT. A 0% increase on VAT is what South Africans need, and it is what the Democratic Alliance will continue to advocate for. And the reason why we're not shaking or moving from that position is because, Naledi, we have a cost of living crisis in South Africa. South Africans already are battling to put food on the table for themselves and their families. South Africans are barely able to make ends meet. We can't afford basic essentials. We cannot afford toiletries. We cannot afford transport. And so we can't expect the same South African Republic that has majority of its people unemployed and living in poverty to now all of a sudden cough up an additional 2% for VAT to pay for basic living. That is cruel. It does not speak to the lived realities and the responsiveness that is supposed to be centered on care that government is supposed to have. And as the Democratic Alliance, we are still saying we do not want a VAT increase. It's not going to work. South Africans deserve better. And there are ways to do this. For example, you'd remember that in the past, we've given a 6-prong plan on how to restructure the budget to get us to free the money that we need that we would have ordinarily gotten from the 2% VAT increase. And there are 4 things out of one theme that is, and I'm going to read it out for you, cutting unnecessary government expenditure. There are 4 things that could easily be done to free out about 60 billion rands without cutting essential services and without taxing South Africans. One is having a 50% reduction in government advertising. If you see that, if you cut that budget, then you have money to free up. If you have a 33% reduction in travel and catering expenditure for the cabinet and government, again, then you'll be able to free up money there. Number 3, if you have a hiring freeze of non-essential government positions for at least the next 12 months, then you'll be able to free up more money right now so that we can be able to use it for the fiscal plan. And number 4, if you have a national audit of ghost employees, given that we know that PASA has given us that we have at approximately 10% of their workforce that does not exist, then those things together, all 4 of them, just those 4 things alone, will be able to clear up about 60 billion rands that the South African government can use towards a budget that is geared towards addressing the needs of South Africans and service delivery. So those are but the things that we can still be able to get right.
But this is, and I'm going to stay with you and I'm giving you 30 seconds for this one, Karabo, because it's important. That, though, what is the proposal that the DA puts on the table? Give us a digit here, because the DA, we had a postponement because of 2%. Are you accepting 0.75? What are you expecting to hear tomorrow? What is the number that you hope to hear tomorrow?
0% is the number that the Democratic Alliance and South Africans hope and want to hear tomorrow.
Sure. Okay. Brett Herron, Secretary General of the Good Party. I mean, when we saw the postponement, we saw Patricia de Lille saying that it's not just the Democratic Alliance that's agreed that we see this postponement. All parties in the Government of National Unity have stood by this decision. What is the number that you want to see on the table being given by the Finance Minister tomorrow where VAT is concerned?
Lady, I mean, all of the parties in the Government of National Unity found a consensus position that the proposal to increase VAT from 15% to 17% was not acceptable. And that we would not support it, and the National Treasury was sent back to the drawing board. We then made proposals to National Treasury and to the Minister of Finance as to how we could achieve the revenue that is needed to support the budget proposals that were set out in the speech that wasn't delivered without cutting those programs and projects. And so, I mean, we would hope to hear that there's no need for a VAT increase. And if, as has been speculated in the media, there's a 0.5% VAT increase, our position as to whether we would support it would really depend on what is in the rest of the budget. Because if we protect things like the social relief of distress grant, the increases in social grants that were proposed, the increase to education to save teacher jobs, the funding of an improved signaling system for rail commuters, if those projects that need funding are protected, and we need to consider a small VAT increase of 0.5%, then we may well support a small VAT increase, even though we've proposed other options for finding additional revenue. Those other options may not be able to be implemented in the current tax year. We are already in the new tax year. So those proposals that we made for finding that revenue in things like reducing the cap or the threshold for retirement contribution deductions, if they cannot be implemented immediately, then we need to see them implemented in the next financial year, and that government engages with the parties in the government of national unity to design a budget that we can all get behind. Okay.
Brett Herron says we can agree to a 0.5% VAT increase. The IFP, what is the position? And I want to just get back to Digit, because the reason why we're only seeing the delivery of the budget taking place tomorrow is because of this issue of VAT. So let's get through that, and then we'll look at all the other themes. The IFP's position on the Digit that you put forward.
Thank you so much. Greetings to you, the viewers at home, the colleagues. As for the IFP, tomorrow we are hoping for the budget delivery by the minister. We are optimistic that tomorrow will materialize. But on the issue of a VAT hike, we do not support any form of VAT hike. Perhaps let me start by emphasizing the point that our people are still experiencing and struggling with high cost of food. People are struggling with high cost of fuel and basic services. So if you were to agree to any form of VAT hike without addressing these challenges that our people are facing out there, that would be totally unfair, because we all know that our people are looking up to government to come up with some form of economic relief, reduce the cost of living. Now, at the point when they are expecting that to happen, and the response is a VAT hike, I think that would be tragic for our people at home. So as the IFP, we feel that for now, the time is not right for the minister to increase VAT.
All right.
Yes.
Let's bring in Alan Beesley, Action SA. I mean, you listened to our four other speakers here on the panel. I wonder if you're worried about whether a consensus, in fact, has been reached, and you know where this leaves us for tomorrow. The biggest concerns as you watch this government of national unity from the outside.
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening to your viewers and to the fellow panelists. Yeah, so, I mean, there's obviously the budget will be presented tomorrow, that there's no doubt, whether it gets approved. And listening to the various GNU partners, it sounds like there's a bit of disarray at the moment. But from Action SA's perspective, we're quite clear on it that there shouldn't be a VAT increase. We just believe there's just too much corruption, incompetence and wastage in the system. You know, I sit on the scope, I sit on the Finance Committee and the Auditor General, and I've just been blown away by the amount of leakages in government departments and government entities. And it's just totally unfair to expect South Africans to have to pay more when there's so much corruption and incompetence going. currently it's like a big bucket with a hole in it, and it's actually not a hole. It doesn't have a bottom. So the more money we're pouring into the fiscus, it's just going out through leakages. And it's quite interesting that the DA spoke about traveling in cabinet. They're part of the cabinet. They're part of the traveling. You know, we've got a 75-member cabinet that lives a life of opulence, you know, and we got 50% of households going to bed hungry tonight, yet we got this massive machine that we're having to feed. So we're just saying we must cut out the corruption, we must cut out the incompetence and the wastage, and only then can we possibly look at tax hikes in the future.
Okay, cut out the wastage, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. I want to look at the themes that matter most to the viewer at home. And Mr. Zikalala, just quickly as we come to you,
yes.
Look, the SRD grant, it's supposed to see its end at the end of March 2025. Is the ANC expecting an extension of the SRD grant? And then you actually didn't give us your number. Is the ANC still at 0.75? What is the proposal that you've put on the table and hoping to hear from the finance minister? But the SRD grant also, do we continue? Can we afford it from the ANC's position?
May I plead with you to allow me an opportunity to engage on this issue of the tax VAT? Firstly, let's be factual and scientific. Who pays VAT in South Africa? It is the people who are in the middle class and those who are at a high level. We have what is called zero-rated basket in South Africa. That is what you call is food stuff that are not VAT priced. So I think colleagues must speak with facts. The second point, I believe that we must fight corruption and deal with corruption. The third point, and save money from corruption. The third point, if we say we want to deal with traveling, let's be factual. Are we realistic in dealing with this issue? Are we dealing with it holistically? Let me play the devil advocate. If we are to deal with traveling of the executive and MPs and MPLs, it means we must have a framework that will say, ultimately, let us have one city of government being one city of parliament. I'm not sure whether colleagues understand that. That is much more strategic in saving cost on traveling, on accommodation, on staff that flies from Pretoria to Cape Town.
Okay, Mr. Zikalala, I'm going to ask you to come back because I think that point is made. I think we need to come back to that, and then because we still need to talk to the issue that the viewer wants to hear is there's social security. What is that going to look like after tomorrow? Please address that.
The ANC's view is that the ANC is firm that the social security must continue.
SRD.
It must continue. And our approach on the budget is informed by the fact that there is a need to generate income. Once you have generated income, you must balance with where do you spend it. We must cushion the poor. We must grow the economy so that the economy will generate more revenue as we go forward, and we don't get into this discussion again. And that's why, as the ANC, we affirm that let us spend on one, cushioning the poor, SRD grant, social net. Secondly, let us invest in the economy, investment through infrastructure and through industrialization.
Right.
Thirdly, let us fight corruption, enhance revenue collection in the country.
Yeah. Okay. I see Karabo Khakhau having quite the response there to some of the points that have been made by ANC, NEC members, Sihle Zikalala, particularly as he talks about who actually pays that in South Africa. And we'll give her an opportunity and also give the platform to some of our other panelists on the other side of this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we're joined by various political parties, 4 of them part of the Government of National Unity and 1 watching, of course, as we sharing their views as well as we get closer to the Finance Minister tomorrow delivering that budget speech, postponed last month for the very first time in the history of our country. This is over the issue of a VAT increase. But another issue is, of course, how is it that the FSS is going to be able to support the social relief of distress grant, for instance, and be able to continue providing social security to the most vulnerable. Karabo Khakhau, I'll bring you in here before the break there. Sihle Zikalala making the point around that, who pays for it? I saw you having a reaction there, but the SRD grant, do we extend it, yes or no?
So let's first deal with Deputy Minister Zikalala's La-La Land. He clearly lives in a La-La Land because he's removed from what life for South Africans is. Not every... when you enter into a shop, you don't hold a card to say, I'm poor and therefore I'm poor. Here's an aisle that I go to and these are all the 0% VAT-rated products. Not every product in South Africa that you go and shop for is 0-rated. Sanitary pads and sanitary towels are not altogether. The cost of fuel does not come at 0%. Therefore, the cost of transport for South Africans who depend on public transport is not free altogether. Life is not a 0% La-La Land that Minister Zikalala thinks is the case. The bottom line is the people who are going to feel the hardest pinch of a 2% hike, or even themselves and goods now imagination of a 0.75 increase, are mostly poor South Africans in the middle class. Poor South Africans who already are mostly jobless, the middle class who are already even defaulting on their bond payments, on their vehicle finances, who are unable to take their kids to schools that they prefer, who are choking in debt altogether. And you're telling those South Africans altogether that it's a small thing to have a 0.75% increase because in Al-Khafal they're not that affected. I'd like to say to the ANC, actually, and good, that people are affected. And the fact that you are bold enough to, on the one end, say there's no VAT as far as the ANC is concerned, and then for good to say 0.75% is a small thing, shows that you are not really interested in safeguarding South Africans and their ability to put food on the table for themselves. Perhaps there's wealth that you have that South Africans do not have that cushions you and your ability to put food on the table. But as far as the Democratic Alliance's analysis of the situation, of the lived realities of South Africans, majority of them in this country, it is not true. They cannot afford a VAT increase, whether it is a 0.75%, whether it's a 0.0019% at all. We can't at all. Let's go to the SRD.
Right.
SRD, Naledi. The Democratic Alliance has always said the primary goal of government should be to grow the economy and create jobs. So the SRD grant should in fact be transformed into a job seekers grant so that South Africans can participate in an economy in a way that affords them an ability to compete to get jobs in South Africa. But obviously you can't have this SRD turned into a job seekers grant if you don't have fiscal policies that are geared towards economic growth and that are geared towards making sure that we create the jobs that we want. And that's part of what the focus of this budget is supposed to be, to make sure that each and every government's KPI moving forward is directly linked to a job, 1 cent per job, 1 cent per expansion of the economy. And that's what South Africans need. And that's what we're expecting this budget to speak about. And the Democratic Alliance holds authority when talking about our ability to grow the economy and create jobs, because we have proven time and again, Naledi, that where we govern without a coalition within the Western Cape, where we govern with an outright majority, that we have a 19.6% unemployment rate for people who are participants in the economy, who are of working age.
But so I'm thinking about the 7 million people that are looking for the DA's position. So I'm looking for a clear yes or no. Extend the SRD Yes or no? What is your message to those 7? I hear the point around expanding the economy and creating opportunities. Is that to say that you are against the extension? I need the clarification.
No. So the clarification is this. South Africans, all the 7 million South Africans deserve an opportunity to have a job. So the government must equip 7 million South Africans with an opportunity to get that job. The SRD must be a job seekers grant. That's it.
Okay, Brett, I see you shaking your head. Brett Herron, speaking for the Good Party. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me first correct the DA. I never said that we want a 0.75% VAT hike. And I never said that it was of no consequence. I've said that Good's position was that there was no need for a VAT increase because there are other avenues that could be pursued in order to raise the revenue required to implement the expenditure that the budget speech that wasn't delivered indicated would be in the budget. So those social grant increases, the SRD grant, the education grants, those expenditure items need to be protected. And then I said, if it is true that the media speculation that the minister will propose a 0.5% VAT hike, if that is true, Good's position will be to see what is in the rest of the budget in order to decide whether we will support 0.5%, because our priority is to protect the social wage and to protect the social spend on education and health. And if the budget in this financial year, in this tax year, can only be balanced by this increase, then we may get behind it. That is what I said.
Yeah.
Then on this job seekers grant or whatever the DA is calling it, it is absurd to link a social security, which is a right in terms of Section 27 of our Constitution, to a demand that people register to seek jobs that do not exist. We know that even if we get a 3% economic growth rate sustained over the next 15 years, we will still have 8 million unemployed South Africans. The unemployment rate will drop, but the number of South Africans who will be unemployed will remain at about 8 million. And so we need the SRD grant to transition into a basic income guarantee. And that's what we would be looking for and to hear from the Minister of Finance when he makes a speech tomorrow.
Sure. I can just imagine what it looks like when, there's a lengthy debate amongst the parties of the GNU. The IFP, your view on what we do with the SRD grant, Mr. Nhlanhla Hadebe. I mean, and as you answer what we do with the SRD grant, there is also the issue of whether or not there are parties that you feel are or are not being listened to when the GNU party members are all sitting together. Does the IFP feel that it has a sufficient voice within these talks?
Naledi, we do have a sufficient voice when the GNU partners are seated around the table. We are happy about our participation and involvement in the government of national unity. As for the SRD grant, Naledi, by definition, the SRD grant is a confirmation by government that our society is distressed. So we as the IFP also agrees that our society is distressed because the unemployment rate is alarming. The food cost is high, fuel cost is high. So there is so much to be distressed about in the society. And in that regard, we do need the SRD grant to continue. Okay. Government must provide. Yes, government must provide, must continue. It must be accommodated. It must be budgeted for in our budget.
Alan, I mean, your view on what we do about social security, but as you watch the parties engage on just, even the discussion of social security and giving support to the most vulnerable in South Africa, if you think about what the message is perhaps to the electorate, what do you think it is to the everyday South African watching this, Alan?
Yeah, so when the budget was pulled, I think it was 3 weeks ago, I actually said in Parliament that the GNU is a farce, and it is a farce. I mean, if you hear the people talking tonight, it's an absolute farce. You know, if I was, you know, one of the people, you know, living on the SRD grant, to say, what is the future actually holding? You know, it's a complete farce. You know, and the people on the SRD grant, they don't want a grant. They want a job. You know, Martin Luther King talks about unemployment as being psychological murder. You know, 10 million people in our country are being psychologically murdered. And the DA are part of the GNU, and they're saying, well, you know, economic growth. Where is the economic growth? So it's fundamental that we get the economic growth. But also when we come back to the SRD grant, it's also important to note, like, there's corruption that's happening in the hospitals. And because of that, people aren't getting proper treatment. There's corruption and incompetence and wastage happening in the schools. And because of that, people aren't getting properly educated. There's corruption and wastage in the police services. So people aren't getting properly protected. So the SRD grant is one aspect, but there's many other aspects that communities are looked after. And because of the wastage and corruption that's happening, they've been deprived of those services. So it's critical that we get that right. You know, when people go to a public hospital, they must get treated well. When people go to a police station, they must get treated well. When people go to a school, they must get taught well. And it's not because there's a lack of money. I think that's the key thing. It's just that there's just too much corruption and wastage, and that needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. As South Africans, we must draw a line and say we're over this. We must get on top of it.
Okay. I want to take calls. And of course, this is really a discussion for you, the viewer, the South African, is you listen to some of the leadership of the various political parties on what they're expecting to hear from the Finance Minister tomorrow. 0105946010. Mpho is calling from Pretoria. Mpho, good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Naledi?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
There's a gentleman from the ANC who just mentioned that zero-rated items are there, and then ordinary people don't get taxed. I've got slips in front of me here. I paid for fuel today. I've got a 15% VAT. I paid for groceries. I've got 15% VAT. I have a Vodacom statement here. It has a 15%. I'm talking facts here. Unlike him, who mentions that he has facts, people have facts, but he does not have a clue that an ordinary South African, poor like me, is paying VAT for every other item that except the zero-rated. And thanks to Mr. Oppenheimer for coming up with the zero-rated. Hello?
Yeah, we're listening to you, Mpho.
Yeah. So he mustn't come here and claim that the zero-rated items are only for the poor. He's clueless. That shows you that these people are now alienated. In the ANC. They're now alienated. They're living in the world of their own, where they do not even know that the poorest of the poor are being taxed about 15% for just about any other thing that we buy. And another thing, it's lack of creativity on their part. They started with the welfare state, where they were giving RDPs like that as a policy to maintain their majority. Now they see that that is no longer working. They are now using this SRD just so that they can attract votes on their part. He doesn't have to come here and tell us he's being strategic and he's a thinker that is thinking strategically, and other people are not thinking strategically. He must face facts and come back from that world that he's in, the ANC land. We are in a real world here.
Mpho, thank you so much for calling. Jackie is in Tongaat. Jackie, good evening. Thanks for calling.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, sir. You're live. Go ahead.
Hello.
Jackie, you're live. Talk to us about what you want to hear tomorrow, or your response to what you've heard from the parties represented in our panel.
Okay, what I wanted to say is these guys wearing top-class suits and ties, and they are earning a fat salary for doing nothing. What they need to do is reduce their earnings to a minimum for service delivery and use the rest of the money that they save to do something better for South Africa. These guys are doing nothing, and they're only increasing the money for the poor people.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much for that, Jackie. We appreciate the commentary. Let's take a look at two WhatsApps. Maybe two. Let's take a look at two that have come in from some of our viewers. OJ Mongwe in Kagiso says, evening, should VAT increment materialize, the low and middle income earners will feel the pinch. Already high prices of foods, electricity, rent, fuel, and so forth. Put our finances in strenuous constraints. Salaries are not increasing to meet these demands, so ministers, MECs should take a pay cut. OJ, thank you so much for that. Let's see another one. Mzwandile Kumalo says, good evening. Indeed, it's affecting us. Cost of living is high and electricity is worse. I need to move towards closing this out. And I think as we look at priorities, the IFP, I think you can talk to us, and I'm going to give you about a minute for this because I am out of time. Apologies for this. But Mr. Hadebe, I mean, what you want to hear, perhaps from a municipal point of view, because what you do have as a party is your own leader heading up COGTA, what you want to hear for, resources going to municipalities.
Thank you so much, Naledi. In fact, not only to municipalities, we are expecting the minister to prioritize frontline departments, your health, your education, your police, and of course, municipalities, because municipalities, they do take care of infrastructure development. That is where infrastructure development is happening in municipalities. And our minister and the president, VF Hlabisa, and the president concurred that there is going to be a new model of budget allocation to municipalities so that service delivery, insofar as infrastructure development is concerned, is done at a high speed. So tomorrow, approaching tomorrow as the IFP, we are riding on a very optimistic wave that the municipality, the Minister of Finance is going to allocate more money where money is expected to go. And we hope that it is not going to be postponed tomorrow. We are optimistic and we will support the budget delivery by the minister, but we are expecting a budget that will talk to the poor.
Okay.
As we know that our people are unemployed. In fact, we normally say in the IFP that it seems that the unemployment rate is sort of winning the race against us as government. So in whatever we do in allocating funds, we need to accommodate that our people are.
Desperate and looking for work to be able to feed their families. Brett, the Good Party, I know that one of the things that you've said you've wanted to see is the implementation of a wealth tax. So 1 minute for you, what needs to be prioritized, what you'd like to hear tomorrow?
Well, what needs to be prioritized is the social security net that the minister had in his budget speech that he didn't deliver. There was the increase in social grants and the protection of the social relief at distress grant. We need to hear that this is a budget. The last time that we had this is the last time we had this kind of disarray around the budget. That there's consultation with the GNU partners early enough for us to have a coherent budget, and that coherent budget needs to focus on allocative efficiencies. It needs to prioritize a basic income guarantee, because we have to stop glibly talking about we need to create jobs, we need to grow the economy.
Yeah.
I've already indicated that if we grow the economy by 3% over the next 15 years, we will still have 8 million South Africans unemployed, and they are entitled to basic income. So we need to hear that this budget speech is transitioning the SRD grant into a basic income guarantee or basic income grant.
Okay. All right. Alan, one of the calls that have been made by your party has been to give more resources to SARS. I'll give you the platform for one more request for that speech tomorrow.
No, thank you so much. I mean, since we've been in Parliament, the 7th Parliament, it's a call that we've been making since day one, increased funding to SARS. There's an 840 billion tax gap at the moment, and SARS is underfunded. It goes back to Tom Moyani's days. So we're really hoping that the minister's got ears to listen tomorrow, and then he gives increased funding to SARS. And if he does, it'll be a massive victory for Action SA, but more importantly for the people of South Africa, because it's the criminals, it's the corrupt and the political elite that aren't paying their taxes. As we've said earlier, the poorest of the poor, they're paying their VAT, they're paying their fuel levies, but the richest of the rich are getting away with paying tax, and it's not right, and SARS must go after them.
Okay, Karabo Khakhau, one question I actually would like for you to actually respond to this one as directly as you possibly can. If we do see tomorrow the finance minister deliver a budget that does have some sort of VAT increase, whether it be 0.5, 0.75, or even a 2%, when we get to the point that we reach budget vote, will the Democratic Alliance support that budget?
No, Naledi. The Democratic Alliance will vote in favor of what is in the best interest of South Africans. A 0% increase on tax is what is at the best interest for South Africans. South Africans don't have money to be bailing out a state that has been chowing their funds, some that have been unrecovered, some that we've lost because of corruption, some that have been mismanaged altogether. The ANC has milked South Africans enough. We can't expect the same republic to come back and bail them out via taxes. It is cruel, it is inhumane, and it's mad altogether to expect South Africans to come back after you've chowed their funds to come bail you out with a 2% VAT increase. That will not happen, not under the Democratic Alliance's watch. And that's why we are in the government of national unity, to play our part to be the vanguards of South Africans, because we clearly cannot let the ANC be there alone. I mean, if Sihle Zikalala and his party were there alone, imagine, they're able to think that we live in another land where South Africans are not being taxed. They're being there alone and making the decisions that they've been making all along, which have shown us in the last 30 years to have failed South Africans, would have been catastrophic for South Africans. And that's why the DA is proud to participate in the GNU, to vanguard the South Africans, to be the voice of the voiceless. And so the bottom line is, a 0% hike is what South Africans need. A 0% hike is what the Democratic Alliance will fight for. We will not vote for a budget that pinches the pockets of South Africans.
Okay, Mr. Zikalala, your final thoughts.
Well, the first thing is that I've never said there must be a VAT increase in this debate. From the beginning till now, I said in South Africa, there are goods that are zero rated. Now, habitual liars can, out of paranoia, want to misrepresent the facts and what we see, and that should remain as such. I've never spoken about whether it is 0. what. I've never spoken about the VAT increase. Our focus as the African National Congress is to ensure the socio-economic emancipation of the entire society. We expect the minister to come with a budget that cushions the poor and help us to address poverty, including the SRD grant. And it is clear that some people are living in their own world and they don't understand that some people have even started small businesses out of SRD grants. I'm not going to explain in detail. There are people who use SRD grant to go and look for work. And therefore, let's not be paranoid and speak as if we are not on the ground. The second thing is services. We want to see a budget that goes to social services, from police, teachers, hospitals, the army, and all. The third thing, we want to see a budget that goes to growing the economy, especially through infrastructure development and industrialization. And this is what we believe should be the core. We're not speaking here on behalf of the minister. It is the minister as executive authority who will present the budget but we are expressing the expectations of us as the African National Congress.
Okay.
I must conclude that the ANC has been with the poor people for years. We've always been on the side of the poor. We've never represented the neoliberals in any platform. We've always been clear on our policies, right from the Freedom Charter to the RDP, to the National Development Plan, and even now in this government, the 7th administration, composed by GNU, we are the proponent of the poor, even if people are trying to renege.
Okay.
And we believe that the spending must seek to grow the economy and cushion the poor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists. An important discussion. And certainly we await then to hear what it is that the finance minister will put on the table tomorrow as he delivers that budget speech. Thanks so much to Mr. Sihle Zikalala, NEC member of the ANC, Brett Herron, Secretary General of the Good Party, Nhlanhla Hadebe, IFP Parliamentary Chief Whip Alan Beesley, Action SA Member of Parliament, and also a member of the Standing Committee on Finance, Karabo Khakhau, of course, who is the national spokesperson of the Democratic Alliance. You're watching Newsfeed PM. We're back in a moment.